Quebecers woke up to full-page ads in their newspaper today and on their smartphone screens asking them to consider leaving the province. The ad reads 21 reasons to feel at home in Manitoba. Among those reasons, we speak French, there is lots of sunshine and craft beer, and importantly, diversity is respected and valued. It's Premier Brian Pallister's latest salvo against Quebec's Bill 21, which bans some public workers, like teachers and police officers, from wearing religious symbols like the hijab. These ads cost Manitoba about $20,000, and more could follow depending on how they're received. So why did the Premier feel this was necessary? Brian Pallister is the Premier of Manitoba. He joins us from the legislature in that province in Winnipeg. Hi, Premier. Nice to see you.
You too, Vashi.
So you have been on the show before, and you very vocally, publicly before, criticized the secularism law in Quebec. Why take this extra step?
Well, we need to make a point. I think, first of all, we have a practical need here for more French-skilled people in a bilingual province, which we are. But of course, in referencing 21 reasons to look at our province, we are taking a shot at the initiative that we think is misguided coming from Quebec. We think Quebecers are too good for this bill. They don't need it. We think that the rights and freedoms of Canadians should be protected wherever they may be. And so Manitoba has always stood for that and will continue to.
The Premier of that province reacted to the ad today, as well as the leader of another political party there. I want to play for you the clips and get your reaction.
Sure.
I think this money would have been better spent for French services in Manitoba. And I think Mr. Pallister must work to keep his own people in Manitoba, like Dustin Bufflin with the Jets.
Same message for everyone. Mind your own business. This is a joke. I'm pretty sure that people would rather go to Montreal, Quebec City, and elsewhere in Quebec than to live in Winnipeg or Manitoba. Just do your promotion, but good luck with that. Good luck with that, Winnipeg.
So, Premier, mind your own business was the message there. Your reaction?
Rights and freedoms of Canadians should be everyone's business. Whether they impact you directly or not, these measures impact a number of people in our country. And because of that, I think we should stand up and defend those rights and freedoms. If we expect others to defend our rights and freedoms when they're in peril, we should stand up and defend others.
Another point that Premier Legault made was essentially you should be, instead of spending money on this ad, spending more money on French services. Does he have a point there?
Not at all, of course. We are spending more on French services, but this very ad is a way to invest more in obtaining French services from skilled people who we hope choose to look at Manitoba for a future career. And we are very interested in continuing to strengthen the ability of Manitoba Quebecers, former Quebecers in some cases, or French-speaking Manitobans, to have services provided to them in French. I would make the point that here in Manitoba, we are looking to defend the rights of the minority French reality in our province with this initiative. I would hope that the Premier would understand that defending the rights of minorities in his province should also be a priority for him.
Just so I'm clear, though, Premier Pallister, if the ad is successful and you are to get an influx of people who move into your province from Quebec, are you prepared to offer or fund extra French services that may be required?
Absolument. We have continued to do that. We're unfortunately seeing something of a decline in people in Manitoba who list French as their first language. We value our bilingual reality in Manitoba, and we want to strengthen it. But as I've said to you before, the erosion of rights is a concern to me. I'm a farm boy. I don't like to see erosion of any kind, and I think that erosion begets more erosion. So I would say that it's our obligation to speak up and to defend the rights of others when they are threatened, and that's exactly what we'll continue to do. Given our opportunity to take this initiative, we're going to pursue it, and I hope others will choose to do the same, because to me, this bill is too good for Quebec, too good for Quebecers. Quebec is strong. Quebecers are strong. I love the province of Quebec. We raised our children in Quebec. We've spent over a decade there. I've enjoyed getting to know Quebec through the many Quebec representatives who I had the pleasure of working with in Ottawa, and in all that time, as we work to advance the cause of strengthening legislation that provided protections for women, for handicapped people, for Indigenous people. I never remember anyone saying to me, I wonder what they wear on their heads or what they wear around their neck. That wasn't the issue. The betterment of Canadians' standard of living, Canadian protections, is what we focused on together, whether from Quebec, Alberta, BC, anywhere else in the provinces of our land. And so I will not be quiet when I see danger in the way in terms of the rights of people, the freedoms of people ever. And I think that Manitoba, as you know, has always stood proud and defended those freedoms as being a fundamental part of being a Canadian.
You brought this up with the premiers the last time you all met. Do you intend to do this, to bring it up this time? And do you think the reception will be as quiet as it was last time?
I plan on focusing on the issues that we share concerns on, principally because I see this brief meeting on the weekend as an opportunity, on Monday, as an opportunity to focus on restoring funding for health care, raising concerns about obstructions to development of a number of projects posed by the new bill C-69. I would also reference a new bill 92 that rushes forward to do some changes in respect of Indigenous child care and welfare protections.
Child welfare bill?
Yeah, it's very, very dangerous legislation because it has no plan attached to it, nor does it have any explicit funding. So these are issues, actually, I must say, quite frankly, that the Premier of Quebec and I agree on. We do disagree on this. We agree on many other things. I would like to focus on the points of agreement, but I will not assume that we should all be silent about issues of importance to us at this meeting. I will use the opportunity, however, to raise the issues of shared concern, given the brevity of time that we have available to us.
Just quickly, a point of clarification for the audience. C-92 is a bill that changes the jurisdiction for child welfare, moves it from the province to Indigenous leaders, Indigenous groups, and various First Nations. There is a timeline attached for consultation by the federal government. There is not funding attached. That was a criticism levied against them, but the government says that that money will be there. That's not the subject of this interview, but I just want to clarify that. On not bringing it up or not making it a point of discussion this weekend, before I let you go, Premier, I mean, is it a bit disingenuous to put it in the ad, to talk about it in the context of your province, but not to bring it up face-to-face with Premier Legault?
No, I've already raised it with Premier Legault, and obviously by putting the ad, I've raised it with Premier Legault. We agree to disagree. He says he doesn't have the social license. He has the social license to proceed. I'd like to make sure that I raise my voice so that social license is gone, and so that he has the social license to defend the rights of minorities in his province. We can agree to disagree. I hope we can still be respectful to one another. We have been in the past. I expect that to continue, but I know him too well and he knows me too well to think that either of us will back down from expressing our concerns and views honestly to each other. That's how you build a stronger relationship, after all. You know, my wife and I have been married for 35 years. We don't agree on everything, and we don't run away from the challenges when we do disagree. That's how we built a relationship. I think that's how we build a relationship among our Canadian provinces and premiers too.
Okay, I'll leave it there. Thanks, Premier Pallister. We'll see you on Monday.
My pleasure, Vashi. Thank you.
I think this money would have been better spent for French services in Manitoba. And I think Mr. Pallister must work to keep his own people in Manitoba, like Dustin Bufflin with the Jets.
Same message for everyone. Mind your own business. This is a joke. I'm pretty sure that people would rather go to Montreal, Quebec City, and elsewhere in Quebec than to live in Winnipeg or Manitoba. Just do your promotion, but good luck with that. Good luck with that, Winnipeg.
If you're wondering what all the fighting words are about, Quebec Premier François Legault and the interim Parti Québécois leader Pascal Bérubé take exception with Manitoba's attempt to woo public servants to leave Quebec. The offensive, no pun intended, was in response to Quebec's secular law, commonly known as Bill 21. Welcome back to Power and Politics with the Power Panel. Tim Murphy, Melissa Lantsman, Andrew Thompson, and Marika Walsh. Andrew, I'll start with you. What do you think of Manitoba and specifically Premier Pallister's campaign? It took a sort of additional step today with the release of these ads.
Well, we haven't seen this type of provincial infighting for quite a long time in the Federation, and it probably couldn't come at a worse time. I get that there's some kind of argument of principle, I guess, that Premier Pallister is putting behind it, but it's really hard to tell whether his argument is one that he's standing up against Bill 21 or whether he's making a grab for more talent, or whether he's trying to protect French language rights in Quebec. It's really unclear what his objectives are. And as a result, it comes across as actually a fairly opportunistic and unfortunate campaign at a time when the Federation needs people to be talking about the strength of Canada, not building martyrs and alienating provinces like Quebec. Now, that said, I have to say I thought it was fascinating to listen to the response, as inarticulate as it was, from the Bloc leader, who has certainly since his time of going to Ottawa been baring his teeth about what he thinks about the rest of Canada. The Federation really, the premiers in the Federation are going to have to think about how they work these different dynamics. We've got Kenny and Mo way off on their own in the West, stoking and fomenting alienation there. We've got Quebec, which is looking to play this martyr card. And then we've got other provinces that are going to have to at some point figure out how to broker the peace here. I don't think Premier Pallister was doing that with this, and I think it's an unfortunate, very unfortunate initiative.
It's interesting, Melissa, because it comes on the heels of Premier Pallister trying to position himself actually as a mediator between all those different factions that Andrew just laid out. What do you think of these efforts?
I think he's been entirely consistent, and this isn't the first time you've heard this from Premier Pallister. He tried to bring it up at the Western Premiers meeting as a topic of conversation. Yeah, and they didn't, they didn't take the bait on that, given the time around the federal election. He's been entirely consistent. This is, whether it's politically motivated or one that solves labor shortages in his province, it's a smart move, and it's a smart move by Pallister. It's on the heels of a number of smart moves that he's made with regards to this issue, and I think that others will follow him. I think we saw this in the House in Ontario. I think we'll see this amongst other provinces, be it in a search for talent or to make a political point. I don't understand the fight from Quebec. It's sort of mind your own business, but you should invest more in French services. So
yeah, the point that Premier Legault was making, I think, from what I gathered, was why don't you spend the money instead of on an ad on French services in your province, and also, like you said, mind your own business. Tim, do you think it's a smart move on the Premier's part?
We used to joke when we were running campaigns that you're always looking for that silver bullet, which is the controversial wedge issue in which 100% of the population agree with you. And actually, Brian Pallister has found it vis-a-vis his voters, right? My guess is he has got universal support for the position he's taking in terms of Bill 21. There's no voters in his province who are actually going to be really against it. So he actually gets to tweak the nose of Quebec, have a fight with Quebec over this issue, and get heads nodding in Manitoba. And I actually think, in a weird way, Quebec is fine with that, because, when you look at the voters behind CAQ in Quebec, they're actually extremely supportive of the Bill 21. So it's actually a political spat that both sides kind of feel okay about. From one perspective, and I get Andrew's point about about these increasing tensions in the Federation, but actually I'm not sure that an attack by a provincial premier on Bill 21 actually adds to that tension. And if I'm Brian Pallister, I keep finding innovative ways to go at this issue. And I give Mark's creativity. It was, it was kind of genius.
I mean, I think that, as Tim says, it's a foil for both provinces, and I think strategically both premiers can politically benefit from it. I think I kind of, to play devil's advocate to Andrew, see a different way of looking at the divisions, and the fact is that Bill 21 is also divisive and also marginalizes some groups. And so I think if you look at divisions that way, then he's actually trying to address divisions or trying to be the person standing up somewhere else in Canada for these people who feel marginalized by the bill.
What's so interesting, though, Andrew, is that, like Melissa pointed out, he has been consistent on this. He hasn't gone this far as to put an ad out, but he has criticized the bill the most vocally of any premier. And when he went looking for support in the past from those other premiers, they were not vocal about it in response at all. In fact, we heard Premier Ford today talk a bit about it, but mostly saying it'll never happen here in Ontario. He was referencing a piece of legislation in the legislature there. But nobody else is coming out doing this kind of thing. Why do you think that is? That's for you, Andrew.
Oh, that was for me.
Yes.
Thank you. Well, I was thinking very deeply about that. Look, I think there's a reason, because this is not what Brian Pallister is doing. Is not just taking an attack on Bill 21, but he is seeding back into the Quebec mentality what happened when you have these types of situations where Quebec goes on its own. Let's remember that this was the entire story of the PQ coming into power. Montreal was at one point the center of commerce in this country. 1976, all that changed. And so for Pallister to be saying that he wants to go and steal that talent out of Quebec and move it to places that is safer, more stable for this type of a climate, I think is a very dangerous message to be putting forward. It's probably the right stance on Bill 21. Certainly we saw a unanimous resolution here in Ontario on Bill 21 saying that this is not the way that we should be running the country. But the way that it's manifesting itself in this strategy, I just think is a bit ham-handed in terms of the approach by Premier Pallister.
How do you think it affects Melissa going forward? The Premier's meeting this week, we've got all of them coming to Toronto on Monday.
Look, I think that he'll maybe try to bring it to the table, but like all of those premiers' meetings, those are agreed upon topics sort of long before they get to that table, and a pretty condensed discussion. But in terms of what Brian Pallister is doing, I think he said it himself on his show. You're invited here because we don't care what you wear on your head. We don't care about your religion. You can come here. And whether you call that stability or whether you call that a welcoming place, I think he's on to something. I think he's on the right side of history, and I'm not sure that he's going to be the last one that says this.
Tim, you're nodding.
Yeah, I know, I agree completely. I think it's, you know, I mean, all of this gems the federal parties, of course, but from a provincial perspective outside of Quebec, I mean, you know, we're seeing this narrative play out, and it's a foil for each of these provinces to play off. And, you know, I think the Premier of Manitoba gets credit for doing that. You know, it allows him to get and also expand, frankly, his political base in Franco-Manitoban communities, which don't always support conservative parties. So it's actually, there's a lot of good in it for him politically. So I expect to see him, you know, back burning the midnight oil, trying to find a new way to raise this issue yet again.
It'll be interesting to see, Marika, on the point around the federal parties. That was a big election issue. It's since died down, at least from a federal perspective. It'll be interesting to see when the House convenes if the pressure ramps up on the government to explore that maybe we might do something about this legally.
That weird talking point that we saw the whole election. I think my gut would say that we are likely not going to see pressure ramp up on Trudeau from within the West Bloc because none of the other parties want to be talking about it either. But if, as Melissa says, other premiers start talking about it, that could be where the pressure comes from. But I think right now that's just not going to be the main focus. I think so much of the focus is in the prairies, so much of the focus is on the oil patch.